Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about us at officehours.global. The first hour is general discussion about media and virtual production. The second hour is usually things we want to spend a little bit more time on. Today we're going to talk a little bit about audio problems. What are the most common audio problems and how do we figure out them and how do we work through them? Tomorrow we're going to talk about sweepers. We're talking about Office Hours 2.0. It's one of the things that you'll see us come up often. And sweepers are going to be some part of that in the near future. And so we're going to look at other people's sweepers and take notes, crib notes off of what other people are doing with their sweepers. And so we'll discuss that tomorrow. On Friday, we're going to have Universe here, the team from Universe, and Universe is a incredible application that really ties into lots and lots of different pieces of hardware and software and allows you to organize them all and work with them. And so it's working. We're using Universe in conjunction with Isadora to run Office Hours 2.0, and we're going to have the team come on and actually explain how it all works. On Saturday, we have the Education Hour. We don't broadcast that, so you'll need to jump on Zoom for that. At 10 o'clock, we'll be back with Cooking with Davinci Resolve. We're going to be doing that again, and you can check out the Office Hours for the links for the recipes. And then at noon, we'll be back with the Belfast method but at Todd Reynolds. So Todd is going to be doing another musical performance, and we'll be taking over all of his hardware remotely. I think it's really important for all of you to take a look, or anybody who has the time to really play with this. Now that I'm a little out of the production push that I've been in, I'm going to be actually jumping in and volunteering for some of these things because I want to learn it too. It's the stuff that's happening with conversations with Tony Mobley, the happy hour of happy, the Belfast method, all these things in Office Hours 2.0 soon. We're really figuring out a lot of things, and it's just an incredible place to learn and also to get to know people. So I would highly recommend keeping your eye on those, and we'll put more information about how to do that. Also, a quick reminder that there's a link if you're interested in getting into embedded programming, we're going to be doing some of that with the microbit, and so we're going to be doing that soon. So if you're interested in that, make sure to fill that form out because we're figuring out how many people are going to be in that first little class that we do. So stay tuned for that. That's in the emails that go out every morning. All right, let's jump into the questions. Courtney?
Okay. Starting things off this morning is William Colvin from Cushington, Northern Ireland, and he says, I work part-time for a local charity. Can the panel recommend any good quality open-source video editing software?
Stuart?
I'm going to trump everyone and just say Resolve from Blackmagic Design. It's got just about everything you want, and it will work on Windows, Linux, and Mac, so it's platform agnostic, unlike some of the other solutions that will follow.
Go ahead, John.
Exactly what he said. Davinci Resolve. How do you like my hair?
Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, the only thing I was going to ask is that there is a Windows versus Mac versus Linux option here because there are various different open source versions. My advice to you is beware of the open source ones, particularly ones you then have to compile yourself to make it work on a Mac. Something like Resolve is consistent, works all the time. Some of these other things can be very temperamental.
Ken?
Davinci Resolve already answered.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement that if you're looking for a free application, Resolve is that. I think that if you have a Mac, just a reminder that iMovie comes with it. For speed, if I was doing something, I use Resolve every day. I also use Final Cut every day, and for different things. And I will say for speed, I would always lean back into Final Cut. It's just a lot faster. But for and some other stuff that I'm working on will make it almost impossible to do in Resolve. But for something that's free that you can actually use, I think that it's a pretty powerful app. It's just a deep app. The big problem that you have to get really into is that it's very easy for you to not get your settings correct in Resolve. So there's more training that's required to really get things out of it. So you have to really pay attention to their training. It's not something with iMovie, you'll open it up and be making movies and very quickly, but you'll hit a ceiling pretty quickly as well. So Resolve has a lot of scale. Go ahead, Dennis. Oh, we can't hear you, Dennis. You're really low.
Oh, I don't.
There you go.
There we go. I don't know what happened there.
Now you're really loud.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Resolve is great and it's free, but it's not open source. Just wanted to throw that in there because it did say open source in the question.
It did. I don't know why if you want something free, why you'd want. I mean, the open source editing packages are not great. Alex?
There is another option that's kind of between iMovie and Resolve, and that maybe might be an option, which would be Lightworks. Lightworks is a very old piece of software from the mid-90s, but it's now available for free. And you can do a lot in the free version. And it's also being used by Thelma Schoonmaker, who edits all of Martin Scorsese's movies. So go to lwks.com to check out Lightworks. There's less tutorials for it out there, but you will not get, you will bump your head up against the limits of iMovie, but you won't have lots of distractions and lots of many other features that might get in your way when you consider Resolve.
Go ahead, Stuart.
Just one note on Lightworks. Last time I tried it, the free version was limited to 720p.
Next question. Let's go to the next question.
Okay, coming in from Tlaloc Miguel Lopez Waterman in Astoria, New York. He says, what methods do you use to keep track of the skilled labor or contractors that you have in your, quote, Rolodex, unquote, so that you know where to draw from when you need someone?
Go ahead, Chris.
I've actually been doing this for a long time. In my address book, I actually used to do this in a Casio Boss in the late 80s. In my address book, next to somebody's name or somewhere in their name, I would just write down anything that they were qualified to do, audio, TD, camera, whatever like that. And then I could just search for that. Unfortunately, most of the time, we find ourselves only hiring the people that we recently hired. And so it's good to have it as a database because sometimes we forget about some of the talent that we've worked with over the years.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, so I'm doing very little labor contracting. Most of what it is referrals. Someone said, hey, can you do this job? I can't do it. I refer someone. And what I do in my address book is, well, first of all, whenever I put a name in there for someone I've met, I put down information like what did I work with them on? What did they do? And that gives me a reference, because the important thing about that is you always want to refer people that are good. And if they just want a name and you give them just a name, you should say, I work with this guy a little bit or this gal a little bit. I can't vouch for them, but if you just need a name, here's a name. And I think those two things are important when you either do referrals or you're doing your own crewing.
That's great. Next question.
This one comes in from Roberto Barro in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania. It says, I'm looking for an alternative to the Mac Snapshot to screen capture. Any suggestions?
Go ahead, Jason.
Screen to layers is a really neat thing that will allow you to do a screen capture of your desktop, and then it will import it into individual Photoshop layers. I'll put a link in Mukana.
And what are in the layers?
The layers are each of the apps. So if you had 5 apps on top of each other, it screenshots each individual one and creates. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah. I have to see that. All right. Screen to layers. Okay, go ahead, Michael.
That is pretty cool. I have to check that out too. I was just mentioning a simple program called Snagit, made by Camtasia. And Camtasia makes a great screen capturing software if you have to do video work. Snagit. It also does basic video capturing besides the screen capturing too.
Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, this is a mark in for the guys doing this week in office hours. 3, 2, 1. So that the comment that Jason just gave is why you come to office hours. Yeah. What I was going to say was the Mac Snapshot is great. You just have to learn all of the options. That blew my mind, Jason.
We have to see what it actually does.
Yeah, I mean, if it works the way you're describing it,
yeah, it works.
No, it's not that I don't believe you. I don't believe the universe most of the time.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, it is what Chris just said is the big thing about office hours is that the group knowledge, because the only person I think in office hours that knew that screen to layers existed was Jason. Now there are 100 and some people that know, and suddenly all of it, like in like 2 weeks time, someone will ask the same question, and we'll be like, "Oh, it's just screen to layers." like that's all you need to know. Like, and it'll be like common knowledge among the group. It's a really interesting process. Anyway, go ahead, Courtney.
One thing that Snagit will do, I think it still does it, I haven't used it in quite a while, but it's cross-platform, and it will capture the client area of a window, and if you're on a web page, it will, there's a way to capture the entire length of the web page. It'll capture and scroll and capture and scroll and capture and scroll and put that into a single JPEG or whatever you're capturing into. So that's very handy to do if you're capturing websites.
It is. I did use Snagit someone used Snagit for me. They said, oh, you could use Snagit for that, because what I do, of course, is I do the same thing that it does, and then I go into Photoshop and I use different layers and stuff like that and put it all together. And I showed someone how I did it. I was very proud of myself and said, yeah, but Snagit does that if you just push the button. I hadn't, anyway. So go ahead, Alex.
And on the iPhone, and I don't know about Android, you can choose with web pages to capture the whole web page, even the parts you can't see.
Very good. Very good.
Yeah, it makes a giant PDF, a big, long, skinny PDF. It's really cool.
Yeah, that's great. All right, next question.
This one comes in from our own Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Says, what has anyone seen, or has anyone seen the traveling Van Gogh exhibit? What should I expect?
Go ahead, Sky.
Well, I've seen the images in person at different museums around the world, and we've seen the movie that came out that was hand drawn by hundreds of illustrators. So I'm very curious about this multimedia experience and wondered if anybody had seen it yet.
Go ahead, Jason.
I have not seen the Van Gogh exhibit. I have seen many, many, many Van Gogh exhibits before this one, and they're always very worth it. There was one in the Louvre about a decade ago that blew my mind.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
I hear it's pretty good. See, that's the Van Gogh ear joke.
Oh.
Go ahead, Courtney.
It's not traveling, but there is a multimedia Van Gogh exhibit that's in permanent installation. It seems to be permanent installation. They painted the building. It's the old Amoeba Records building in Los Angeles, right next to the formerly Cinerama Dome, now closed.
Andrew?
Yeah, I think we should explain. I believe, Sky, you're referring to the walk-through exhibit where Van Gogh's work is projection mapped on large walls and screens.
Huge. Yeah, that's the one I'm talking about. Yeah.
Go ahead, Nigel.
Seen it.
Yeah, my wife has seen it. She says it's absolutely terrific. I was going to go, but it rained, and when it rained, they shut it down. So it's about an hour's time. You walk through it. I think you can spend longer than that. But I also know that they give you slots, but they were quite flexible about which slots you could get to.
I think it'll be interesting to see. I mean, there's a lot of reuse of the content that is going to be really interesting about how to build, these kinds of things out, where maybe being right in front of the painting isn't the only way to view it or the way to experience it. I think that limiting it to where the painting is and really thinking about these kind of multimedia and then eventually virtual. We built a museum. We built a statue museum in virtual reality 5 years ago, and it was simple but very impressive. Like we were able to walk around. We built a 30 by 30 foot motion capture. So you actually, and then so we actually could track the goggles externally. This is before a lot of the tech was available. So now the inside out. This was before inside out tracking was working. So now with inside out tracking, and that's the being able to scan the outer area and knowing where you're at. But what we did is created a 30 by 30 space, and you could just walk around that space, and there were statues on stands that were there in front of you, and you could just look at them and look at them from any way you want as if they were there. And it was pretty, within the technology at the limited resolution, it was like, oh, I could do this. And we think a lot of times about that, what you can and can't do in virtual. Like sometimes people keep on trying to think about like, well, I wouldn't want to wear that for 2 or 3 hours. Well, maybe you wear it for half an hour to walk around and see some statues that you would never have access to otherwise at the same scale to you as they would be. So I think that there's a lot of when I see this kind of stuff, you think about how to kind of reformat, a lot of those things to be effective. Next question.
To your point, I think they're projecting this in like a 4,000 square foot volume, so it's a massive experience.
Yeah, but it's not the painting anymore. Like what the point that I'm making is that it's not the painting anymore. It's exploring the art of that artist, but not necessarily being limited to the pigments.
There is something to see the brushstrokes of the artist. It's pretty magical. I mean,
It
you're
is.
right. That's but this is not that.
Yeah.
Next question. Sorry.
Next question. That's my job. Next question.
Okay, you guys can fight over that. All right, Stuart Fairweather in Melbourne, Australia says, Oculus Rift S cable, tips on where to find one and at a reasonable price.
Is that hard to find right now? Is this the just the connector to the PC?
This is actually a question from a mate on the In Pit Lane group. He's got one of these Oculus Rift S's, and apparently the cables are no longer made, and they're not exactly reliable, so they break very easily. So those people who do have them are selling them at a premium.
What kind of premium?
Several $100s.
Oh, that sounds great. I'm gonna go look for my
Great for
Oculus.
them.
I'm gonna go look for my Oculus Rift. I was like, where are my Oculus Rifts? That I don't use anymore because the tethering drove me crazy. All right, I gotta figure out how many I have. I don't know if I have any left, but we had 10 at one point, so or eight of them at one point. Anyway, next question.
Well, in that case, send me a link on Discord if you've got one available, and I'll pass it on to Richard.
All right, sounds good. All right, next question.
From Juan C. Robles in Mexico. It says, does anyone have some impressions of OS X Monterey on the Apple?
Go ahead, Ken.
Yes, I've installed it on a couple of my M1s. I was hoping for the universal control, but that's not out yet. But the some of the other features like focus mode, which you get on your phone, you can now do that on your M1s, and AirPlay to Mac is now properly implemented onto the PC. So any external speaker plugged into a computer with running Monterey, that turns into a proper AirPlay speaker.
Go ahead, Jason.
I feel like I've had AirPlay to Mac for a very, very long time via Rogue Amoeba. Now, I know it didn't do video, but yeah, it's a very nice integration. I'd say the one thing that really stood out to me is just how much more performant it is on the M1. They are just going to keep doing that, and this is only the beginning.
Go ahead, Alex.
I will be only downloading it or using it on the M1 Max Mac that I'll be getting soon, whenever it comes. But on my other kit, I'll wait a couple of months before trying it even. I have put a link in the Mukana to a direct link to the installer. So instead of using the App Store and losing the installer, there's a 12 gigabyte installer that you can use if you want to put it onto a USB stick and you want to experiment with it.
Go ahead, John.
So I just installed it on my main machine, which is iMac Pro, and I was really surprised it didn't have the fancy pictures of Monterey like it has on every other, location in California. And it does something different with the menu bars now. They're like grayed out or something. It's hard to read the text. So choosing the right background is important.
Go ahead, Michael.
The audio companies have not updated their plugins for Monterey or Windows 11. And so a lot of the audio companies are sending out warnings saying, please don't upgrade yet. Please wait. We have to test it. And so in the audio world, things are at a standstill as far as Monterey goes.
Yeah, I'm curious of how long Apple will put up with audio companies not keeping up. This is a $1 trillion company, and these are little plugins. And I could imagine plugin packs starting to come out for Logic that just do everything that they need to do, or companies getting bought up. I mean, it's becoming absurd. That these audio plugin companies just can't keep up with something that they've been given a beta for a long time, and they just this is anyway. It'll be interesting to see with whether Apple will press this hard at some point that you need to catch up, or we're going to start adding all those features to Logic. And that might not mean anything to anyone in Pro Tools, but at some point it will be problematic. Apple needs them to move forward, or it needs to do it themselves.
Yes, very much so. Yes.
So I think that the pressure may get higher if they keep on, like we're seeing this disaster that is Dante, that has us like rethinking our entire pipeline because Dante can't figure out how to move audio across an app, a new operating system. Like I don't even know what the delay is, but Audinate needs to figure that out too, because we're like, I don't know if I should keep going. That's where we're getting to pretty quickly. So Alex.
By the way, my votes for future Mac name for Mac OS would be either Mac OS Oakland or Mac OS Competent. Would be fantastic.
I think it'd be great. I think that those would be a lot of fun. Next question.
Yeah, Mac OS Fresno coming soon. Okay, next one comes in from Manolo Lozano in the United Kingdom. Is it possible to output OBS directly into the Atem Mini via a Blackmagic Decklink Mini monitor card on a Windows machine?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So yeah, the OBS will support a Decklink card. You go in there and under the Tools menu, and you'll set up your Decklink outputs. You can output program and preview. So I mean, once you're out onto the Decklink, there's no reason that shouldn't go straight into the Atem.
Next question.
From Dennis Champion Walker from Southland-on-the-Sea in the United Kingdom. Where do we find the link to watch the Office Hours 2.0 version of today's show?
We're still observing. You'll see all the pieces here. Tomorrow we'll start streaming it. So we'll put a link into Mukana tomorrow, and at whatever state it's in. So Andy and Jonathan are working really hard on it, and we got a bunch of people pounding on it right now. So but we'll, at whatever state it's in, we're going to start streaming it to an unlisted link tomorrow, and we'll keep on doing that until it gets to a point where we think it's sufficient to start replacing what you're seeing here. This YouTube. The first thing we'll do is we'll have that parallel link running for a little while. Then we're going to replace the YouTube link that people see and we'll still keep on having this Zoom session going. But we'll change the link that people see when they go to YouTube, and then finally we will retire the webinar. And just go in and just use basically, our plan is probably just use after hours, and the hosts will go into a breakout room. So that's kind of where we're going with the process. Next question.
From Mike Beardmore in Reading, UK, says how best to use the new Zoom two-way chat within a waiting room.
Go ahead, Rupert.
So this is a relatively new feature, and it's literally what it says. It's two-way text chat to the waiting room. I think it's dependent on having Zoom version 5.8.0, and the hosts or co-hosts in the meeting can literally chat to the participants or the people waiting in the waiting room, and those people can chat back. Now, the rest of the participants in the meeting don't see that chat. It's just between the hosts and the people in the waiting room. In the normal chat, in meeting chat, you've got to drop down there, who you're going to chat to, whether it's everyone or everyone in the waiting room. And I've seen people use it for and this is only in meeting, don't have waiting rooms in webinar, but in meetings I've seen people use it, say when they have a long running meeting, but it has different sessions. So you're waiting to let your 2 o'clock people in, but you want to let them know you're running late or something like that. Or it gives you also a chance to kind of authenticate the people who are in the waiting room, have a little chat back and forth with them before you actually kind of let them in.
Next question.
Coming in from Bo Cortle in Charleston, South Carolina, says, has anyone used something like Tasmota to consolidate control of RGB light bulbs? Is it worth attempting?
I don't think that I'm not familiar with Tasmota. I'm just looking at it right now. It seems to be I'm looking at in GitHub. So we'd have to. This is probably something in after hours we would just play with. But what it says, it's a total local control of quick setup and update or control using MQTT, Web UI, HTTP, or Serial. Go ahead, Rupert.
Just check out superhouse.tv. I think that channel does a lot with those products.
It's something that I'm not familiar with. So again, this is, as Chris was mentioning before, this is why you do office hours, is so that you get exposed to things from someone else that you haven't seen before. So we'll have to take a look at it deeper. And if we decide that we want to learn more about it, maybe we can get those guys to come on, or we'll at least do some kind of lab. It looks interesting. I just don't know enough about it. Next question.
This comes in from Tex Whitney in Sydney, Australia. He says, for a Zoom meeting with all Australia-based panelists, will there be any performance impact if the account is US-based and not local?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yes, but actually the opposite of what you expect. If you're connected to the US servers, you get slightly better performance, and it's less likely to drop out.
Interesting. So you actually get you get better performance from the U.S. servers than from the Australian servers.
Yep. Office hours, connection and whatever is almost always perfect. But connecting to the Zoom for Australian stuff and what have you, it's like the bandwidth isn't as high.
Got it. Next question.
Coming in from our own Sky Gleason in the wet Seattle, Washington area. Sorry if this is an old topic. The new version of the movie Dune. What should I expect? What will be my experience on the iMacs versus the iPhone?
Go ahead, Jason.
If you watch the new Dune on your iPhone, please don't watch the new Dune on your iPhone. It was marvelous on like my massive television, and anything less than that, please don't.
Alex?
Well, I suppose if you want to have the same field of view, you just have to hold your phone really close. This is essentially the IMAX field of view. So why not? No, in my reaction, if you want to, as regards the film itself, it's an interesting trying to get the elements of serialized TV combined with movies, because obviously it starts off saying Dune or Dune Part 1. I maybe would have liked to have had the option to buy a ticket at 50% premium. They also got me into Part 2, which would encourage them to make Part 2. So watching Part 1 wouldn't have been a waste of time. Something worth exploring, maybe, to combine funding models.
I will say that I think what I read was that Part 2 was greenlit like 3 weeks ago. So we were pretty certain that we're going to get it. Go ahead, Stuart.
Well, that would be the first time one of the second parts of Frank Herbert's work is actually being filmed. I should point out, if you're looking through your online guide and you see Dune World, do not watch it.
Okay, great. Andrew?
This is slightly tangential to that question, but I'm going to see Dune tomorrow with a friend who has a hearing impairment on a screen, an AMC screen that has open titles, which means I'll see the titles on the screen too, the subtitles. And so I'm very much interested in how that will impact this viewing.
Given the mix of Dune, I think it'll improve the experience. They've definitely taken the Christopher Nolan approach to audio mixing, where
the mumble.
You can't understand half of what they're saying. Yeah, and I always feel like it's me, but my whole family they're like, when are we turning on the subtitles? Like, it is amazing that we've suddenly got into this whatever style that audio mixing has gotten into, that I feel like I don't want to go to the theater because I can't turn the subtitles on and I can't understand what anyone's saying. And it's not just I'm not old and with bad hearing. It's like my whole family is like, let's just turn the subtitles on because I don't understand. I can't keep track of the story. And Dune is so complicated. Like, if you haven't read the book, like, and you don't understand like a couple things that they said, none of this makes any sense at all. Like, it's starting to get to a point where I won't go to the theater if I don't have subtitles, because I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to actually understand what happened. It's becoming insane, for that, because we turned it on like 3 or 4 times and then we just left it on for Dune, because there was all this mumbling going on and all this little whatever, and you're like, I know that this is important and I don't understand what's actually happening. They're just mixing the vocal, they're mixing the characters so into the background, and I think Christopher Nolan has pushed it forward, and I think he's ruining the movie experience. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, I watched it on Apple TV 4K on a 4K screen, and had AirPods Pro with spatial audio. It sounded really good, and I felt like the dialogue was clear. So maybe it's a mixing theory.
It's interesting because I've got a 7.1 in my house, and still can't understand what's going on. Go ahead, Alex.
I was lucky enough to see it at the Warner Brothers screening room in London, and it was totally clear to me. So I think what these are mixes that are not distribution proof, whereas of course mixes used to have to be distribution proof, and every aspect of film had to be dealing with bad presentation, which of course there's much more of these days because it's all automated in lots of theaters. So I think this is also that they're not bearing in mind, they're just assuming that everything's going to be presented perfectly and all the setups are perfect in all the theaters.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I have a pretty good system at my house, and I hear a lot of things perfectly, with it, and it doesn't come. This one isn't coming out that way, So it's it's just frustrating. Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to say basically what Alex says. A lot of times the encoding fold down into other people's systems from the Atmos down to whatever your system is. Create, something will be out of phase. One channel will be out of phase on your system or something, and it'll throw stuff into the center channel where the dialogue should be, and it'll just cover up the dialogue. So I found that a number of times.
That could be the case. Sky.
Well, we're going to a location up here that actually sells beer, so that will help, I think.
There you go. Alex.
It also might be the fact that you're not getting to hear the same as things that I'm getting to hear, because the whole point of IMF, interoperable mastering format, is that you get the same master is producing lots of different versions, and maybe the one that's being distributed to home theaters is not the same as the one that I heard.
Right. It's definitely not.
Screening
actually.
room. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Next question.
Coming in from Todd Reynes in Allen, Texas. I've just purchased a Blackmagic 4K camera, and I want to split the HDMI feed to 1, the Atem Original, and 2, the Atem Extreme. Do you know of an HDMI split solution that would pass this camera control, I guess that's the CEC, to at least one HDMI out?
Well, that's a deep question. We'd have to, because what I have right now is we've talked about in the past, I have this HDMI splitter, but I don't know if it would pass the information back. It's like a lab problem. Go ahead, Jason.
The two ways I can think to do it is with an HDMI doctor, so you can actually restrict the upward stream on one of the cables. The other way to do it would be the dumb way that I'm sure that Todd thought of, which is just plug it through the switcher and lose one of your outputs. That will work.
I don't know how that would work. I mean, he's trying to split the HDMI.
Right. So he wants control out of one of them. So the one you want control out of, plug in, and then use one of the outputs to feed the other.
So plug
switcher.
it into the extreme.
Right.
And then your output from the extreme goes into the other switcher. So you loop through the extreme, and then the extreme can shade the camera and control it while the other one is just receiving it. Yeah, that makes sense. That would be a way to make it work quickly. What I was thinking about is I was thinking of a very messed up solution, which is to use the bidirectional SDI and loop the HDMI through. I don't know if that would work. We'll have to think through that. Next question.
All right, coming in from Tex Whitney in Sydney, Australia, says, on a small Zoom meeting, can Riverside be used to get better local recording? Sorry. Is it worth the trouble? I want the best of both worlds, a great meeting and a great ISO recordings.
Go ahead, Ken.
I don't know whether I can answer about having a great meeting, but local ISO recordings definitely does. Leo introduced that to us a few weeks ago, and we've been using it regularly on last week on office hours to record our each of us locally, and it works really well for that.
Good, Stuart.
Yeah, Leo took about half an hour to an hour with us in after hours to go through that, and frankly, Riverside should delete their live streaming stuff. It does a disservice to the quality of the recordings that were made. The recordings are phenomenal.
Go ahead, Alex.
I was on last week in office hours a couple of weeks ago, and I was especially impressed by how they handled the fact that my bandwidth went down for various boring reasons here. But there was easy access to the link, and I uploaded it when I had better bandwidth. So it's very flexible for a web app. I think it was really good.
It also depends on who's coming into the meeting and how technical they are and what they're able to do. For instance, I just did one recently that I had to deliver really quickly, and what I did is I just opened up QuickTime in the background and captured it. So I just captured the interview through QuickTime at the same time I was in Zoom. Now that takes hard drive space and some technical knowledge to do that with a camera. So you just have to decide what's possible. But I can grab onto any webcam or whatever and just have QuickTime open and record it to the drive and then upload it. It's a much larger file, and a much higher quality file. and then you're just using Zoom, but it just depends on who are the people that are in the conversation. Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, says, I remember going to a local festival with an 80s cover band, and the crowd was not engaged at all. After the engineer engaged an SSL bus compressor, Smart C2, the drums felt stronger and the crowd started dancing. Why could that have been?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I can't speak to why the crowd started dancing, but I can speak to what that bus compressor is doing, which is limiting transients. And the thing about mixing live and in the studio for that matter is you want to have some glue. And if you take the drums, for example, which have a lot of, very sharp transients, and you limit those transients, you smooth them out, it's just easier on the ear. And when mix engineers are working either live or in the studio, for example, like when I do horns, for example, if there's live horns, I'll put all the horns through a subgroup and actually put a compressor on that. It glues them all together. If I don't do that, what you have like these sharp punches poking through the mix, and it's just distracting. And then along with that, and there was a really good example that Pete Wojcicka did with the Remotes band, is on some of the mixes he's doing, he's not just looking to smooth those transients with a compressor, he's also looking for the instrument. What instruments are going to glue all this together? So for example, Brian Maddox played an acoustic guitar part, which was a very even kind of transient piece. It didn't have a lot of peaks and valleys to it. And that helped glue the mix together. So these are two separate things, I know, but they do act in the same way, which is just to smooth things out. It's easier on the ear.
Good, Michael.
Everything that Andrew said. And I would mention perhaps even a slight volume change occurred, and that the drums got louder and the beat got louder, and they wanted to dance with the beat. There is a plugin called the Glue made by Cytomic Automotive, and it's a really nice plugin that adds glue and has oversampling on it to beef up your recordings.
I think it's a great discussion. I think that we also, when as someone who used to DJ a lot of things with people dancing, you also want to always keep track of, there's a lot of variables that have people dance or not dance, who's on the floor, the brightness of the room, how warm or cold the room is. There's a whole bunch of things that happen there. So I think that all of these things are valid. But I also think that you also want to look at like, hey, something changed. Well, that's one variable that changed. And you always want to keep track of the other variables that changed at the same time to see if those have any kind of contributing factor, because getting people to dance on a floor is a calculus problem, not a simple algebra. Next question.
Okay, coming in from Todd Rains in Allen, Texas. A question for a friend. My pluggable TBT3-UDC3 is not connecting to my two monitors. Are there any thoughts on why?
Go ahead, Rupert.
So quite often with these docks, we see them needing the display link drivers, but I actually don't think that that should apply to this particular one, but maybe worth just checking that out. Other than that, I would say check for power, because this one requires a very specific 20 volt power supply, so just make sure you've got the right one going in there.
Next question.
Coming in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, says my NVIDIA RTX 3080 GPU is a Tough series from Asus. It has 5 ports in total, 4 display ports plus 1 HDMI. After plugging in the 5th display, 1 display drops out, leaving 4 in total. Is perhaps the HDMI port sharing an output, or are 5 displays even possible?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Yeah, I think you got it in one with the last sentence there. It is highly likely that the HDMI port is sharing one of the DisplayPort outputs, and the board can only do 4 outputs. The information on that will be deep in the manual. They will not advertise it publicly that it only does 4, but it's got 5 plus.
Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, my guess is that one of those outputs is intentionally designed to stream out, so that that's what your 5th display is for.
Next question.
This one comes in from Tex Whitney in Sydney, Australia. Says, can the panel suggest the best practices for remote editing in Final Cut with the client in a different location?
I think that I was waiting for Alex, the other Alex, to say something here. But the way we've done it is literally Zoom sessions. So we show them we share up Zoom and they look at it. I think that there is a tool built into Final Cut, but we haven't used it as far yet. We've always just let them see our screen over Zoom. It breaks up a little bit. They're making edit decisions, and we haven't found that they couldn't make those decisions there. I will say that we don't find it. People like to sit in an edit station. I don't know if Chris isn't here to talk about it, but I generally hate having someone sit over my shoulder while I'm trying to edit something and figure it all out. So I don't think it's usually that much faster. I think sometimes it can be when you're tweaking something, but a lot of times what we want to do is have them just go to Frame.io and give us notes, look at it, type in what they want. It's just so much easier for them because the problem is that it actually takes more time to sit there and discuss it, whereas they can sit there and from here to here, I need this, from here to here, I need that, and then we rev it. I think that they sometimes you need discussion for it, but it's very, very few and far between that we need more than an edit list, a punch list of what we need to fix. Next question.
This one comes in from Walt Palmer in Rehoboth Beach, Delaware. He says, I've been challenged to engineer a remote audio interview in a rural area with moderate to poor cellular reception and no internet. Can anyone suggest a device such as Cradlepoint and a Yagi antenna to do the job?
Go ahead, Rupert.
On just the cellular side of things, if you go Yagi or any kind of directional antenna, you just keep in mind that you're going to need a way to tune that in. If you're going to go directional, you're going to need to know where to point it and what kind of signal you're going to get from it. Also keep in mind that you may end up needing to bond connections together to get the kind of signal you need. You can look at Petlink for that. Of course, they have the routers, the antennas, and the service to bond those connections together if you need it. They have omnidirectional and directional antennas for that stuff, and so does Proxycast, Proxi cast. Again, they have directional. Now, the one thing you need is height. The high you can, if you've got a long throw, get your antennas up as high as you can, but then try not to push your coax runs too far. So you may actually need to end up getting like a real robust industrial type router and putting that at the end of your pole with your antennas also, if it's at that extreme of a condition.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, Rupert covered it. I'd avoid the Yagi and a directional antenna unless you know precisely where the towers are, or if you have time to dial it in, as Rupert mentioned. I typically go with an omnidirectional antenna. Usually, just getting the height is more than enough. And also, I would carry if it's a live interview, I would carry a POTS line adapter from the likes of JK Audio so that you can fall back to POTS if you have to.
I was going to say that if you're really worried about connectivity, POTS or Plano telephone system may be the right solution. People still have it because it's legally required. So it's what our fiber should be. But I think that you may end up with a POTS line, somewhere. And the main thing to remember is that a lot of times the pickups on the phones are really bad, and which is why your audio is bad. If you have a JK audio on both ends, where you're able to put a professional mic into a phone, into a POTS line, and get a professional output out on the other side, with some EQ, you can actually close that distance pretty far, a lot better than many of the other things breaking up or anything else, dealing with it. Go ahead, Courtney.
And I'd advise doing what they call a double ender, which is you record each end individually at their independent locations. Then they send those files in, and a skilled editor cuts them together for archiving and for later broadcast.
Yeah, definitely. I was assuming with this interview that you're trying to connect to a live event, but if you're not, then double ending is what we do all the time. To anytime I can double end, that's what Riverside does essentially. But anytime I can double end a post recording, I'll double end a post recording. You can get very, very high quality with very limited bandwidth. We've had ones where we have 6K cameras and really good mics and everything else, and we can barely see them or hear them, but they can hear enough to answer the questions. And then when the files come in, they look great. Next question.
Okay, coming in from James Babbitt in San Diego, he says, please discuss hardware and software solutions to enhance dialogue on TV shows. Some of the dialogue on Ted Lasso seems hard to understand on a large Apple HomePod.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay, one of my favorite shows, and I was just watching it last night, and I will say this, is that when someone mumbles in with a British accent, I have a much harder time understanding it than if someone were mumbling in an American accent. So I think part of this is cultural, for example. And to your point, Alex, earlier, turn on the captions. That's a great tool at home. I don't think there really is a solution on the set or in post-production except to tell your actors to stop mumbling. But on the other hand, like, for example, one of the characters in Nate Lasso, Nate, I have trouble understanding him sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I can tell when they're recording him on set, he's speaking at a low level and he's got his mumble and his accent, and all that kind of adds up to me having to turn the captions on every once in a while to understand him fully. So I think I think those factors in a lot, but there's no solution.
Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, that's roughly what I was going to say, and maybe I'll give you an example. When I'm in the States and I go to a diner and say, "Can I have a bottle of water, please?" They say they don't understand, and I say, "Can I get a bottle of water, please?" And then they actually know. Firstly, I'm saying, "Can I get a bottle of water?" And I don't, and I pronounce the T's with D sounds. So it is cultural, I think, to "Can I get a bottle of water?"
Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
One thing you might want to try is that some AV receivers have the ability to add some dynamic range compression. Some AV receivers call it night mode, dynamic compression mode, or dynamic volume mode. So just in case it might help. It won't be an accurate representation of what the artist put out, but if it helps you understand the story, then yeah, try it out.
I think the problem is that the artists are mixing it in, because I go back to old movies, like, is there something wrong with my system? And it's fine. And then I come to the new movies, and so I think there is all the problems that we're talking about here, but mixers have decided that they're going to mix the vocal tracks much more into the background, and it's bringing out all these problems. Because when I go back to older movies, they're fine. So I totally understand what people are saying, and so it's definitely the artists are we're going to stop listening to the artists if they keep on making it harder and harder for us to do this. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes, this relates to what you were saying, Alex. In the olden days, when we used to mix for film, they had a thing called the Academy filter, and that was placed on all the dialogue, and it emphasized 4,000 to 8,000 cycles so that it would make it more intelligible, and it really reduced all the other stuff to get rid of the stuff on an optical soundtrack that would create noise in the theater, etc. And that's why all those old movies sound so intelligible, because they're very frequency limited to just the hearing range for voices.
Well, and again, I don't think that we need to do that, but I think that I think that there's a lot of opportunity. I just think that there's a style that is starting to really become in vogue, that I'm noticing in the newer stuff, and some of it is perfectly clear and some of it is not. And I think that I'm starting to actually want to know who the sound engineer is for movies, because there's some that I'm starting to identify as I can understand what's going on, and this one likes to mix dialogue down, and I'm just like, I just don't know, it's actually becoming important to me, which is insane. Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I think that sometimes the surround encoding doesn't come through quite right, because sometimes I'll be watching a show or a movie and the music is way loud on the sides and the dialogue in the center is buried.
And I think it's the encoding. I think you're right. And I think it's the encoding. And I'm one person that actually absolutely positively knows exactly what my speakers do in surround. Like I have test signals that I stream to it, that I sit in my side and I hear center, like I hear exactly, I mean, I am like listening to it. I'm one of the few people that can actually interrogate all my speakers to make sure that they're putting out what they're supposed to be putting out. And so I know that they're correct, but I do agree with you that I think some of the mixes are not correct. And I think that may be part of the problem. Go ahead, Stuart.
Just to your point about knowing who's done the mix. From personal experience as a cinematographer, when you're premiering a film, if people start asking questions about the cinematography, they've noticed. If they start asking questions about the lighting, they've noticed there was something wrong. When we do our jobs right, nobody notices. And people are just so engrossed in the story. This with the audio is taking us out of the story. So you're not enjoying the experience anywhere near as much. You're more likely to go and watch something else instead.
Right. Or just turn the captions on. Next question.
All right, coming in from Morgan Price in Victoria, British Columbia. Question for Alex 4D here on the panel. It says, I saw you in an M-Puppet video. What approach or Puppet plugins do people recommend for Apple Motion to add a bit of cartoon movements, squishes, etc., to objects?
Go ahead, Alex.
Well, M-Puppet is the kind of only After Effects puppetry type solution. And what that does is get individual bits of media and create spines and parts of them so they can be squashed and moved independently from each other inside a video clip in terms of animating. So, for example, to make my beard longer or be able to kind of move up or down or something like that after something has been shot. But not that. If you want to do something in motion, I actually recommend investigating the overshoot behavior, parameter behavior, which allows you to do springy effects. You can spring things on or off or change the value of a parameter, its position, its scale, its rotation. And it's not just for overshooting. It's all sorts of springy changes from one value to another. And you can make it so that you apply the overshoot behavior differently to the X or Y or Z scale of things. So you can choose a very different kinds of springiness, let alone rotation of X, Y, and Z rotation as well. So overshoot behavior if you're into behaviors, but M-Puppet is kind of the only solution for working inside motion.
Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, says on the popular alternative content category in movie theaters is live concerts. Given a console with 5.1 panning capability like the Allen & D Live, what would it take to add surround or Atmos mixing to the accidental production pipeline?
Go ahead, Mickey.
The audio would be needed to be fed into an encoder that can encode the PCM streams into EAC3 or AC4. Then that needs to be fed into a video encoder that can handle Atmos or those formats from Dolby. Then pushed out to a CDN that can also handle that format. Then eventually down to a player that can also play out that format.
Next question.
Alrighty, another highly technical one, and maybe the last one for this hour. Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, says when recording a Groovebox instrument like the Roland MC707 via analog outputs, would two stereo stems, drums and synths, be sufficient separation to master effectively?
Go ahead, Michael.
Yes, it would. And you can do fine with drum bus plugins that will work for you. I've gone both ways where you have separate outs for every instrument. You can send the bass out on a channel, the snare out on another channel, and so on and so forth. But you can mess things up pretty quickly with plugins. So be careful when you're doing individual outs and going through the sounds. On the drum bus plugins, there's plenty of presets that'll get you going with compression, EQ, and a little bit of reverb and some other types of things to get you going. On to Mickey.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, it depends it depends. It depends on what the plan is for that, that stem. If you need to, if you really need to be able to work on it individually isolated for whatever reason, then yeah, you'd want to bust them out and play them out individually. But if you know that you don't need it, then yeah, even as one stereo mix down is fine.
The only question I have related to this is, do we need a little jingle for it depends? It depends. It have like little things as we in for office hours do.
We need like a barbershop quintet, like it just depends.
Yeah, just it's got to be like a little or some little graphic that pops up that just goes, it depends. So anyway, all right. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and change the subjects to the second hour. One of the things that it seemed like the troubled audio is something that audio is probably the most important thing in your live stream and in your media production. And one of the things that bites us probably the most often as well. It's just a complex process and there's lots of things that can go wrong. So anyway, I thought it would be good for us to have a discussion about what we think some of the most common problems are and how we try to suss out, trying to figure out what actually is happening and correct those. So we'll go ahead. I think that we can probably just jump right into the questions. We've got some questions. So if you've got questions about audio problems, if you see us starting to discuss those, go ahead and throw those into the queue. And we'll start with the first question. Go ahead, Courtney.
All right, this one's kind of a free-for-all coming in from Juan C. Robles in Mexico. He says, what is the worst audio problem that you had to solve?
Go ahead, Stuart.
There's a video that most people can find on YouTube of a German hill climber called George Plaza. George passed away several years ago, but the audio of his car going up a hill climb, let's just say it looked more like a square wave than a sine wave. So when you're trying to repackage it for broadcast, there was a lot of work just to try and recover what we could to make it sound broadcast capable. Because the vision was amazing, so it was worth the effort.
I think the one that I find the most vexing, I don't know if it's the worst audio problem, but the one that constantly seems to, any new system with Dante has clocking issues. Like every new system, Dante has clocking issues where the audio just disappears for a couple seconds and then comes back, and it's always something, it's always some card or something somewhere, but it's just something that comes up often enough, a couple times a year that we're doing some kind of new build somewhere. And it always just, you have to thrash it out. And it's always something where it just suddenly the audio is not there, and then it comes back. And it's been something that we've dealt with for the last, 5 or 6 years, at least since I started using Dante. And so, go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, sometimes you get a rumble in your song or a rumble in your mix, and you need to take out around 230 hertz or around in that range. So sometimes just the rumble in a song can be very distracting, and just take a little couple, 2 or 3 dB off of 230 hertz can help a lot.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I can pinpoint one specific worst problem, but most of the time in the world I live in, it's either poor planning, poor coordination, or poor cooperation from other departments.
Yeah. Next question.
Coming in from Roscoe Jones in Brea, just north of Disneyland, says, what are the issues with having some gear plugged into orange power and other gear plugged into unisolated grounds?
Go ahead, Marty.
So orange power gives you a direct path to ground. And
can you explain what orange power means?
So it's a electrical system designed for hospitals specifically that became very popular with production studios. I use them in recording studios.
And when you say orange, it's the color of the plugs.
So the color of the outlet in the wall is actually orange, where others are white or black or brown or something. The orange are distinctive, and they have a little green dot next to the ground pin, actually. And the way that that's done is there's a wire that's on the back of that jack, that electrical outlet, that goes directly to ground. It does not go through the power panel or the rest of the facility, whereas all of the other outlets in the building will all come together in the breaker box or the load center, all get joined together, which means all of the ground pins on all of the outlets in the facility, they're all interconnected. And from there, that will go to ground. That's not the case with orange power. It's a more direct, reliable connection to ground. And so the difference between them is you have the potential for different voltages on that ground pin, which will cause ground loops and hums and buzzes.
So that's especially if you have one plugged into one and not the other. Is that
right? If you have part of your system plugged into an orange outlet, like a power amp, like your mixer, and then you might have a wireless receiver or a power amplifier for speakers plugged into regular ground. Now you have the potential for different potentials, meaning voltages that just are living on that ground plane, and that can cause loops and hums and buzzes.
Good, Courtney.
Yes, and everything Marty said was correct. And the only way, if you do have to power something out of split it across an orange and a non-orange outlet, is you probably want to lift the ground off of your non-orange outlet with a little ground lifter of some sort, and that will prevent the ground loop from happening, although it is dangerous, and I don't recommend it.
Next question.
Coming in from Roscoe Jones, also in Brea still. Have you ever been okay recording 60-cycle hum knowing you could remove it in post?
Go ahead, Marty.
That can be one of the most difficult things to do. If you have any opportunity to remedy that situation, do it before you record it. Once you record it, it's not just 60 cycles that's producing that noise on your tape or on your recording. It's the second, third, fourth, fifth upper harmonics, and then the lower harmonics. So there's 60 cycles is the frequency of AC, right? But then you have 120 to 180, 240, and they will all be present. It's sort of like 10 people trying to hum the same note, and some people will be, here or there, and that's what you get when you're recording AC hum.
Yeah,
it's difficult to get rid of.
Yeah, Andrew.
Yeah, just leapfrogging off what Marty said, I totally agree with that. Absolutely, get rid of it if you absolutely can. Get good at getting rid of hums, and have tools for that with you. It's very important. Sometimes you don't have a choice though. On a recent gig at a venue that will remain nameless, and a big shed. This is where they host concerts and festivals. They had 60-cycle hum that was a problem there, and we were hearing it. And I went up to the system tech, and he said, "It's the place. We don't have any control over this. It's the power here." So sometimes you have to live with it and get rid of it later.
I know actually some engineers that I work with that will run everything on batteries. Like literally when they come, they've got car batteries that they have, like there's this really heavy case that they bring in, and literally everything they use just is powered from that, because they were just like, well, we were tired of the hum and worrying about whether we're going to get it fed to us or something's going to happen. So we just disconnected from everything. And so that's what they, and they're usually running the whole production. So but it's funny that nowadays that our voltage requirements are so low compared to what they used to be, that you can run a lot of your hardware, all on something that doesn't require it. Yeah. Go ahead, Rupert.
Yeah, definitely trying to fix it up front, because fixing it in post really hurts.
Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
Precisely
I see what you did there.
Precisely what Marty said earlier. You're not only dealing with 60 hertz, you're dealing with the harmonics as well. And nowadays, it's a lot easier to figure out where that hum is coming from and to solve it as well.
Yeah, Marty.
Yeah, so there could be two possible ways that you could fix a 60-cycle hum. One is on the electrical side of the equipment, and the other is on the audio side of the equipment. So you can use transformers to remove or to lift the ground or isolate the ground from one piece of equipment to the next piece of equipment in an audio chain. And something like the Morley hum eliminator. So this is a 2 analog audio circuit device that has both XLRs and quarter-inch plugs. And it's a transformer that isolates the ground from input to output, and this can often be very effective.
Next question.
This one comes in from Juan C. Robles in Mexico. He says, "What kind of tools do you use to troubleshoot audio?"
Go ahead, Marty. Oh, can't hear you.
Okay. So for analog audio, the must-have box, if you don't have this box on the set, you'd probably be sent home by the A1, is the Q box.
Everybody has a
this is
Q box.
Everybody has a Q box. This is you must have a Q box. It's a requirement of the job. This device bridges across an analog audio signal to let you listen to what is there. There's a built-in microphone so you can talk over it. If you have two of these things and an XLR connector, you have an instant communication system. It has a tone generator in it. It has a headphone amplifier in it. It's very flexible. The next device that I would have is a good cable tester, right? So you want to be able to test any kind of cable that you are being used on your show. So whether it's XLR, quarter-inch, mini plugs, RCAs, network connectors, RJ45s. Another handy box to have. This is the Sound Devices MM1. It is a headphone amplifier and a microphone preamplifier, so you can both listen and talk on an analog circuit. For digital, specifically for Dante, you can get portable PoE powered, PoE meaning power over Ethernet, so it doesn't even need batteries. This is a Dante headphone amplifier. It's small, it's portable. It even has a belt clip on the back of it. So you can tune into a Dante circuit. And then Aterotech has a similar device. This one is designed to sit on a desktop, but it's small and portable enough, and it's also battery powered. You can listen to any of the 64 channels on a Dante network.
How does that? You can listen to any of them. Do they still have to be routed to you? So when you say listen to, or is it able to just go grab them? You have to.
That's a really good question. I suppose it would.
Mickey, you were nodding your head.
Yeah, maybe somebody knows for sure. I haven't tried it.
You still have to do the routes within controller.
Yeah. Okay.
But it's a way for you to verify what's coming out of that path.
Right. Because
so it fakes whatever it's intended to be.
Is that I'm inside of the Dante routing. I'm curious exactly what this thing does.
So I believe you can route multiple channels to a single receiver.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And so with this device, you can select which channel you want to listen to. Anything that
you could route all 64 channels to that. You could just route all the channels to that box, and then it can scroll through them.
I believe so. Yeah. It says you can select up to 64 channels. So
interesting. Go next, Andrew.
Yeah, this leapfrogging off of that. This is something by here. It is a Dante box. It has analog inputs, actual mic inputs, and it is basically a 4-in, 4-out Dante box. You can also monitor locally. I have not used this to troubleshoot, but the nice thing about it is it's small, portable. You can even clip it on your belt. It's designed for artists to hear their mics back and also get a mix. I think the thing with using Dante troubleshooting in production is that this box would have to be on the same network and VLAN as whatever we're troubleshooting. That's one thing to bear in mind. So typically with Dante troubleshooting in the field, you're just troubleshooting with the device that is in place. It's rare that a Dante device just fails completely. It's usually in the networking. Then going back to this, I've used this for many years. I have just replaced it with this, which is something by CTP Systems. It's the DB Box 3. This thing is it has everything this has. It has a cable tester. It will also, you can also listen and produce AES audio, which is very nice, which is not as common these days, but it's still in a lot of use to some degree. It tests MIDI, it does all that sort of stuff. It's heavy, it's bulky. So it's heavy, it's bulky. So I got this. This thing's really cool. This is designed for the stage tech. This is very light. It's USB powered. You can charge it. It produces tone. It's a listen device.
And what is that device?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is by It's called the Sound Bullet, and you can get them in the United States through Rat Tools, which is Dave Rat's company. They just market it. They don't produce it. But it has a little speaker on it. But this thing is, you can just wear it on your belt. It even comes with this little clip. It's great because I can wear this thing all day, and I sometimes forget I have it on, and I can plug it into a stage box. If someone says, "Am I getting that?" I can say, "Yeah, I hear it." If someone says, "Hey, can you send me tone down the down this DI box?" It has this. Check this out. I can actually go through the DI box instead of just plugging a microphone in to produce something. So it's really handy. It's about $250, I think, for this thing.
It's great.
Those are my tools.
And it's so important. Like, we're going to keep going through this. We're going to spend a lot of time on this question because your testing tools and your testing is how you DX all of these things. So how you fax lines, how you make all of this work is having the proper test tools. There's many times where something's going wrong. There's no way to figure it out without the proper generators or receivers. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, on top of what both Marty and Andy have mentioned, I also carry around the SM58, a simple dynamic mic that I know will always work, even if it's been tossed around. A reliable pair of phones, of course. I also, on top of the Q box, I carry around a bunch of barrel tone generators because sometimes you need more than one, and you need to also differentiate, be able to send different frequencies of tone so that you can ID different lines, multiple lines. So if okay, I know I'm sending 400 hertz down this specific line, as opposed to another line wherein I'm sending 1K. And that's a way for me to be able to differentiate between them. MM1, I think Marty mentioned that, very, very handy sound devices, MM1. And also a bunch of phantom power, what do you call this? Detectors. So little XLR plugs with the light at the end that can tell you if there's 48 volts going down the line.
And do you have a specific brand of the barrel tone generators that you like?
Sure. I'm a big fan.
Is that
of
like the Shure,
ones.
like the A15 TG?
I don't remember the model numbers, but yeah, Shure one.
Jason?
I'm amazed that I'm the fourth one, and no one else has mentioned the poor boy version of this, which is the Behringer CT100. This does just about.
Mickey reacted very poorly to that suggestion.
Okay, all right, Mickey, but this is the cheap one. All right,
the Q box
isn't
that cheap.
Here.
Go ahead, Jason.
Last thing, an RF signal mapper is really handy for audio.
Yeah, absolutely. Jason Panks?
Yeah, everything everyone else has said. Something else we used to use on festivals is we'd have, besides some of those tools, we'd have a couple mics just to bang through or test inputs real quick from on stage inputs. 2 mics, a dynamic and a condenser. So you could have a 57 and an SM81 from Shure taped together. Have a little couple like shorty dongle little cable adapters hanging out, so you can test XLR inputs, 1/4-inch inputs, DIs, line outs, just something to talk down with your voice clearly and let the audio engineer on the other end verify that it's working, that it's there, it's in the correct space, and that it sounds like a voice. It sounds like something that you do want to hear and there's no noise. That's a couple easy tips.
Good, Marty.
So another company or set of tools to look at is NTI, who they make a bunch of small portable analyzers and generators. So this is a digital audio analyzer for AES and SPDIF and such. They make analog generators, digital generators, a bunch of different things, very high quality, very handy stuff. To Jason's EBTech, Jason's Behringer, the original was the EBTech. This is the one I held up. They gave up, actually. They succumbed to the pressure, the competition. And another very handy thing to have, of course, is a small laptop that you can connect to your system to do various kinds of analysis. There are a whole bunch of software tools that you can use to test digital audio, analog audio interfaces with equipment. It's a very handy thing to have.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And if it comes down to, all those are great specialized tools, and with microcontrollers, there's a lot of specific audio test equipment that's out there that many people have mentioned. But if it gets down to trying to figure it out yourself and you're in the analog world, having a pocket-sized oscilloscope is a kind of a handy tool. So lets you look for, like these two, where they have lithium-ion batteries in it. You can slip it into your case. They're under $100, and you can see. You can see any waveform, and you can look for those out-of-band waveforms that may be causing harmonics down in the audio band. So you can look for high-frequency, interference that's coming in over your cables and so on, and isolate it and maybe figure out where to trap it or filter it.
It's really fascinating. Are those does it do 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch jacks in to these little pocket-sized ones?
They just have clip leads. Those are, this one here has teeny little, the type of connectors that are on, I can't remember the name of them. They're not in connectors. They're little coaxial connectors, and you get adapters that go to BNC or clip leads. And you just clip it on. And they're digital oscilloscopes. They have all kinds of inputs, testing. You can save waveforms out of it. You can, they're amazing in their quality for something under $100.
And who makes that one again? Sorry, did you? Oh, that's Saint Smart. Yeah,
Saint Smart and this JV Tech. These guys make a bunch of them. And I have one of those. I think I showed that to you, Alex.
Yeah, you did. You did. I just wanted to show it again.
Some of them also have signal generators, so you can generate a signal and look at the output. And they have TFT color displays on them. The one above it, I think, had 4 inputs. So
that's interesting.
Handy to have.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, the last thing we didn't really talk about with this is how to troubleshoot RF and what tools to use for that. And that's a big question to answer. Like we could spend another 15 minutes on that. But the real quick thing is that if you're doing RF coordination, that's another level of troubleshooting. If you want to do quick RF, there is no quick RF troubleshooting because it involves, specialized knowledge and training. But if you are in a new venue and you need to walk around and check your RF environment, I didn't bring it with me. I have one. It's a handheld RF scanner by RF Venue. It's called the RF Explorer. Thank you. Yeah, which is a nice box because actually, if you do walk around with your computer, you can log at the same time, or you can just walk around and look at this thing and go, okay, I've got a problem here and there, and I'll avoid those frequencies when I'm doing my coordination. But again, that's a very quick, down and dirty way to troubleshoot RF, and that's just to get you into the beginning of your RF coordination work.
Right. Yeah. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, and also, of course, a simple multimeter can get you far. And also with the blue box that Andy has, and I believe some of the NTI boxes, you could also record onto them and use that as your channel ID, so that's a little easier as well.
Yeah, one of the things that I build a lot of is channel IDs that are across, especially because I'm doing a lot of stuff that is more than stereo, and so I might have up to many channels, but up to 16 channels that I'm trying to track. And one of the things that's interesting is that I had to think recently about voice, so I push a whole bunch of channels down. But right and left in surround is different than right and left in stereo. And I needed to be able to have something that was pushing all those tracks down. So I had my wife actually do the stereo tracks, and I did the other one so that I have it there so that when you hear a woman's voice, in this case, I heard stereo, and for me, I heard surround. And so because the stereo stays the same, she doesn't have to record new ones. I have to keep on recording new ones. So anyway, but I think but thinking about tonal and who's doing it, going through that, so that you could push a whole bunch of stuff down and you get a sense of what this is actually looking for. But in my channel checker, it's that I build, it's literally like right channel, left channel, center channel, LFE. Well, you can't do LFE because it's too low. It makes it, you have to do something else. So, but you kind of go through all of these to make it work. I do say LFE, but what you hear when it goes through is is all you hear. Anyway, next question.
Coming in from Roscoe Jones in Brea, north of Disneyland, says, what are the best ways to make the acoustic band quieter in a small venue?
Go ahead, Stuart.
This is one about people skills, actually. And the simple answer is ask them to play quieter. If they've got a conductor and you want to give them more instruction, I would suggest Leopold. And trust me, people will get that joke in a second. But yeah, it's a case of getting them to play quieter, as well as you can go through and do all the acoustic treatments, but talking to them and finding out what level is good for the venue is the easiest solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Next question.
Another one coming in from Roscoe Jones says, what preventative maintenance should be done on mics and other sound gear?
Go ahead, Jason.
Sorry, I shouldn't have raised my hand on that one.
All right, go ahead, Marty.
The best preventative maintenance you can do on microphones and other sensitive equipment is to take care of it. Keep it clean. Make sure it stays clean, and make sure it gets handled, appropriately. It shouldn't get dropped. It shouldn't get, never drop the microphone. If an artist drops your microphone, send them a bill.
Go ahead, Michael.
For microphones, it was a big debate on earspace.com, and people were talking about how to store it in the mic locker room, and we're talking thousands of dollars of microphones here. And finally, some studies were done and people talked about it a lot. And here's the direct quote. When not in use, it is recommended that the microphone be stored in a cool, dry environment. It is best that the microphone be placed in a plastic Ziploc bag with some moisture-absorbing crystals near the capsule. This will ensure that any moisture that may be present around the mic, and especially the capsule, gets absorbed.
That's good. Go ahead, Andrew.
So in the age of COVID, doing production, my answer has changed. Before COVID and all that, when I was handling either wireless handheld or lav mics or headset mics, I would just wrap them up neatly and put them on a table, if I were the A2 for the event. Now what I do is every time a mic comes off of a person, I clean it with some solvent, with a wipe, an alcohol wipe. And I'm careful with the windscreens because if you wipe them down, they'll just disintegrate quickly. So I just sort of lightly tap them. And part of this is also perception. When I have cleaning tools laid out near these microphones, and executives, for example, if it's a corporate event, are walking by, they see, oh, he cares, this production cares about our health in the age of COVID. And those are really important things. And they also go to this question about maintenance too, I think.
Go ahead, Courtney.
A couple of tips. Never use compressed air to blow the dust off of a microphone, or canned air. That should be obvious. And never spray any type of solvent or cleaning solution directly on the mic or anywhere near the capsule. Try and keep them dry, as was said by Michael earlier. If you're shooting at a seaside location, be careful because a lot of salt will gather on metallic cases and microphones and your equipment, and make sure you clean it thoroughly after you work at a seaside location and clean that salt off because it will cause corrosion of most types of metal. And sealing it in plastic and avoid humidity is one of the killers of condenser microphones, so you got to watch out for that.
We used to have these, and I just don't know where. I can't remember where we got them, and I haven't had them for a while. But they were larger beads that we would have in jars that we could, and basically they would change color as they got more moist. And you threw them in the oven and came back, and they're back into gray. And so then you could keep them in a box, and it would just kind of dry everything out all the time. And so you'd keep them around. And so but I can't remember the brand of it.
It's called Silka Gel with indicator, and you can buy them in little packets, and they're in that breathe. They're in plastic packets that have little microscopic holes in it, and you just throw that in with the equipment.
But it was like they were large. They're large beads. The reason we liked them was because they didn't get into everything. The large beads were easy to find as opposed to the little silica beads. Next question.
Okay, coming in from Jason Panks in Nashville. Briefly, what steps and thought processes do the panelists use for troubleshooting audio?
Sorry, I think I'm on a different one there. Oh, okay. Yeah, go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, I start from the source of the signal, which is typically a microphone, and try to think through, could the problem possibly happen here? If it's a yes, then I look deeper into that. If it's a no, I move down the chain and until I reach a point where I'm able to solve the issue.
Yeah. Go ahead, Josh.
So sometimes if I've established that audio was working before and is not working now, what's changed? So last in, first out.
Yeah. Go ahead, Chris.
One thing that's always interesting is sometimes in the troubleshooting process, if other people are there, you will do something and they'll go, "Oh, what? You don't think I plugged that in?" I was like, "Well, maybe you didn't." You know, I mean, I'm sorry, but all evidence is pointing to the contrary. It's not working. So we literally have to check everything. And sometimes there's a little bit of politicking involved when other people are involved.
This is also why test signals are really important and things that are unified, because test equipment, we had a case where we had a signal that was coming to us out of polarity, so it was 180 degrees out of phase, which means that when it sums together in the stream, when it goes out to the world, people with phones that are summing, if you listen to it at headphones, it sounds fine. People on phones, it sounded like nothing, just sounded like noise, coming out of it. And we had an audio engineer that was just absolutely certain that it wasn't anything to do with his rig. And but what it took was us having handheld meters, being able to look at a Leisure Zoo and go, this is going sideways. And we just worked down the pipeline of where did it stop? Where it stopped was the convenience panel right next to him, that whoever had wired that convenience panel had just flipped two leads when they were soldering it together. The only one we could find in that convenience panel that had that problem, but somebody wasn't paying attention for one moment and swapped those out. And it was a big production, what made it harder was someone who was absolutely certain that they were right, that just wouldn't let us touch anything near them because they were like, this part is completely fine. And when something's not working, you do have to start at one side or the other, and you just start working, and work through it. But you have to have the tools, some of the tools that we just talked about before. For me, I always want to be able to pass it through some kind of metering. I mean, some kind of I want to see all the bits and pieces of it to be able to see what's going on. But a Leisure Zoo meter is really useful. What that is it shows you the spread, and so if you have stereo, for instance, it'll look like a nice little flower pointed up. If it's pointed straight up and it's really thin, it just means you're getting mono. It's just across the channels. But if it turns 90 degrees, you know that you're 180 degrees out of phase. So it is a super powerful meter for us to see, like when we pass stuff through. And that's just an SDI signal going into our computer with something that has that and it's called different things in different programs, but it is one of the more important ones for us. Anyway, go ahead, Andrew.
And Jason, thanks for this question. Make sure your gain structure is rock solid when you're working with other people. And that's kind of, Alex alluded to that a little bit in this, in that someone said, "Oh, everything's right." And clearly it wasn't after it left them. But gain structure is a big deal, especially with Zoom calls too. Like if you're doing a Zoom-based event, and someone's microphone sounds distorted, if you know that your gain structure coming from them is rock solid, then okay, it's probably they're overdriving their mic pre. Probably. Not always, but probably. At least you can start on that end. And that's really important. So if you take care of your end, then you can start on the other end, and it'll just make everything go quicker.
Go ahead, Courtney.
And if you're trying to diagnose a ground loop, which is one of the major problems you'll run into with audio a lot of times, it could be one of the toughest things to nail down and troubleshoot. Start by touching everything that has a metal case on it down the line, and see if it the 60 hertz hum gets noisier or not. And then you want to keep one of these in your pocket and eventually go through each piece of equipment and remove the grounded plug and substitute it through one of these things, which is a cheater plug, which lifts the ground, and see if the ground loop goes away. And then that will be your source of your ground loop hum. And the other thing is, by touching things, you can eliminate things where you find that the shield wire has come loose on a mic cable or something.
Go ahead, Jason Panks.
Yeah, I was going to contribute to my own question. I just want to hear thoughts from everyone. I agree with what everyone else said too. Another thing I also try to do is scale of the problem. Is it one input? Is it all of them? Is it just one output or all of them? And kind of work from there. Because if it's just the snare drum, no reason to even look at your speakers or your recording gear.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Understanding where it's showing up and how widely it's showing up tells you a lot about the pipeline, because it's, if it's only happening on this one channel, it's not a generalized problem. And that means that you can definitely get the leg that you need. Absolutely. Great input. Next question.
All right. This one comes in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA. Speakers in hybrid events with an in-person audience often suffer from room noise and PA background through the stage mics. What are the best solutions for hybrid audio, and what are the low-budget options?
Go ahead, Mickey.
I'm not entirely sure what the question is about, but I'm assuming it's the built-up system noise due to having multiple mics open. If it's that, you can solve it with an auto mixing tool. There are various out there. Or if you do not have access, if you don't have access to that, be on your toes and ride those faders. If a microphone's not being used, fade them down a bit.
Yeah. Go ahead, Andrew.
If it's a talking head event, the PA speakers and monitor speakers that are providing foldback to the people on stage, run them as low as you can get away with. What I usually do is I run it low and then just bring it up a little bit. And sometimes they'll say, hey, can you turn it up a little bit? But that helps the broadcast and webcast audio a lot. It's really that simple. If the PA is too loud, any sort of echo cancellation has to work harder. And it's why Alex encourages us to use headphones, for example, on this. It just means that those circuits are working harder to produce better sound. So a lot of times I'll walk into a room and go, wow, this is a hybrid event. The PA is loud. It doesn't need to be that loud, really.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, everything Andrew just said. Keep your room sound, especially your stage volumes, down as much as possible. Use in-ear monitors if you can, so you eliminate your stage monitors. But since Josh specifically asked about hybrid events, let's take it a step further where this may be an interactive, meaning hybrid. So people from outside of the venue may be speaking in the venues through the loudspeakers. And in a lot of cases, that sound can be then picked up by the microphones that the presenters are wearing or holding. And that can be difficult because now you're just dealing with room acoustics. And so, a couple of ways to do that is you just ride the fader on the in-room microphone. You can also try using an expander or a noise gate, which you may want to apply when you have outside people speaking, right? Which will help cut down on that reverberation and noise, but then take it out when outside people are not speaking. So you'll get better quality audio from the in-room microphones.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback off what Marty just said too, because it reminded me that when I'm doing events, I'm putting on headphones to listen to the room during the event, because the room might be tuned, the PA might be tuned well, but you might not hear like a ring, or it's a very echoey room, and maybe you need to EQ out that flutter echo. A lot of rooms that are echoey have something called a flutter echo, which actually occurs in a bandwidth that you can treat with just turning the EQ down. So the better tuned the PA is to the room, the better your hybrid side of that event will sound.
Yeah, and one of the things that we do a lot is when we do a lot of these, and one of the things that we do is we make sure that we test it, and we test it without the talent. I know that sounds crazy, but a lot of times people just get into it like, oh, it's going to kind of work, and we need it to work perfectly. So we need an hour in there to make sure that it's going to work. Like we tell people we're going to need an hour to get that to work, especially if it's not one of our engineers, to do that, because you're going to want to talk at different places. You're going to want to make sure that it's not there. Now, what we typically do is use a Dugan to basically the mics that are in the room and the person talking are on a Dugan. So when one starts to talk, it pushes the other one down, and the other starts to talk, it pushes this one down. And so it turns out the Dugan works really well at kind of opening and shutting that, but it does take tuning. Like you can't just turn it on Like, and it's just gonna work, you know. And so, but by tuning the Dugan, we've been able to do that pretty well with most microphones in the room. Now, if someone doesn't have the time or the inclination to do that, then we tell them to go to SM58s on stage when you're talking to that person. So you can do all your presentations, you can do everything else, and then quietly just pick up a handheld when you're going to talk to the person that's remote. And so that you have a lot of off-axis rejection, and you end up without, you know, if you don't have time to tune it, it will get rid of most of that pretty quickly if it's not turned up too high. So those are kind of the things that we do. But we've had very, very seamless interactions with audiences with remote speakers by using the Dugan approach and just kind of having it and just bouncing it back and forth. Next question.
Coming in from Douglas Carmichael, he says, would a Furman unit like the Prestige series, and he has a link, remove 50 or 60 hertz hum issues caused by poor power?
Go ahead, Jason.
The short answer is, for the most part, yes. It really just depends on how many isolated banks each unit has. So, you know, it may have 20 outlets, but those 20 outlets are only cut in half and physically separate from, you know, from half of the other outlets.
Go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, I use a product called Surgex, and it's military grade, and it's really good. And Furman licensed. They got sued by Surgex for pulling off some of their proprietary technology, and now Furman is using the Surgex technology. But Surgex is awesome. Go check it out.
Go ahead, Mickey.
It depends on what the exact unit you're using. If you're just getting the voltage regulator from Furman, then that will handle only the rise and fall of voltage, but not filtering the power. But if you do get one that filters, it may clean up your hum issue, but that only guarantees the equipment that you're powering off that unit. If you have to interface with other departments, like, you know, with feeding time code to the lighting designer and getting different feeds from different places, if you're plugging your equipment somehow to other systems, then your hum issue could come from there.
Next question.
Coming in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA, says, what are the principles of EQ for women's voices versus men's?
I don't know if anyone has anything specific. I know that I tend to bring up the bass a fair bit to kind of equal it out. I just bring up, not the, when I say bass, the lower frequencies, I'll bring them up a little bit depending on the voice. But as Mickey said, it depends. Go ahead, Mickey. You were going to say something.
Yeah. Even like within, between female voices and male voices, those voices vary so much. So how you treat them EQ wise also varies.
Yeah. Marty?
So everybody has different resonances to their voices, chest resonances, head resonances, and different microphones will pick up these resonances differently. So everybody has a different sound quality, a different part of the frequency spectrum that their primary energy is in. And so you really need to look at each person, and if you have an RTA, a real-time analyzer that on your mixer that shows you what frequencies that this audio signal is primarily in, you can kind of hone in on that. Helps you to hone in on where you want to allow frequencies to come through, and then use your cut filters to take out information that is unnecessary and can just add noise.
Next question.
From Chris Widner in Lafayette, or Widener from Lafayette, Indiana, says, was trying to use Zoom with a Rode Go 2 on an iPad Pro and monitor with AirPods. Is it not possible direct after the iOS 15 update? I am going to have to bring a mini mixer on my travels. Or am I going to have to bring one?
I didn't know that was possible in the first place. So that's amazing that it worked at all. Go ahead, Josh.
Yeah, I believe the new update in the firmware will allow you to access the settings for the individual transceivers on the Rode Go 2 that's just released. They are limited, though. There's a lot of still requests that haven't been satisfied with Rode in order to do some of the other things with the devices.
I'm really surprised that we haven't seen a cost-effective, like a Rode, that price point or $100 more than that, that did two-way communication to that little box, that had it did a headphone output and a mic input into, the little receivers. Cause I've got two of those to tie those in. It's a big mess and everything else. It seems like the kind of thing that Rode could do. And if they charge an extra $100 for it, I'd pay for it, because it would just be, because right now I'm paying for two Rode Go 2s to do the two-way communication and managing that. And they're not great at it. And it would be amazing to be able to have a USB-C in, and then just it takes mic in, it shoots headphone out, and you can plug it on. I mean, because right now the only one that we've had that really works well has been the Microflexes, and those are expensive, to just to do that one thing. Next question.
Coming in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh, PA, says, what are the tools needed to phase out noise from a recording if an isolated track containing the offending noise has been acquired?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Wait, sorry. Oh, wasn't ready there.
I'm sorry. Anyway, sorry. Sorry. Go ahead.
With doing that, you can't just simply invert the polarity of the isolated noise track, because that is not perfectly aligned with the noise that's in the actual track where the content is. So what you need to do is utilize some sort of a noise suppression tool. There's DNS Studio. If this is in post-production, I'm assuming. Tools like a DNS Studio or Isotope RX voice denoise or spectral denoise, and put it in learn mode on that noise print track, and then apply the noise suppression on the content track that you want to clean up.
By the way, getting room tone, super important. Getting gaps of silence that you can sample, really useful. That's, even when we're recording remotes, we have people just say, hey, can you just stay for a second? And we hit record. And we just pull a little bit of a track out, and then we can get them to, we can sample that later. Go ahead, Marty.
First of all, compliments on a very creative solution. This is how active noise canceling actually works in headphones. And so to try, what happens is, if you've ever looked at the waveform of an audio signal and really zoomed in on it, it has a very specific shape. And if you can isolate that shape in a separate track by recording it separately, so that the noise has to be steady state noise. It can't be changing in any characteristic way. And if you can record that noise just on its own, then you can flip the polarity, as Mickey was mentioning, and try and match the waveforms have to match exactly for this to work. So Mickey was saying, if they don't match, if it's a different part, a noise, different place in the room, different kind of microphone, might record the track in a different way, and then it just won't work. I have actually was on a production where we were just recording some announcing that was outside, and there was some noise generator somewhere, and I put two microphones on the gentleman who I was recording, one facing up and one facing down, and recorded them on separate tracks, with the idea that the one facing up is going to capture the voice primarily with some background noise, and the one facing down was going to capture more background noise and less voice. And that gave me the ability to, maybe in post, I was hoping to be able to flip that polarity on that second track and try and at least minimize the noise. And I didn't do the post, but I had heard that it actually kind of helped.
Go ahead, Stuart.
I was just looking for a link for a current version of something. Back in the 90s, there was a program called Cool Edit. I believe that was what was bought by Adobe to become Audition. Now, you could go into Cool Edit and record a sample of the noise and then apply that as a filter to noise, and it was very effective. So I'm not sure if the tool's still there, but it appears that there is a version of Cool Edit now that will do it.
Some version of matching like that is available, I think, in almost everything. Almost everything out there now at this point has some version of I'm going to take a print and then I'm going to remove it. It's just a matter of how good they are at it. Next question.
Another one from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh says, what equipment is needed to EQ multitrack for home theater to raise or lower individual channels?
Go ahead, Mickey.
And most home AVRs are capable of doing this. Not only actual like EQ, but also picking each channel and raising and lowering them. That's part of the calibration process for your home theater systems.
Next question.
From Juancy Robles in Mexico. He says, how often do you test your audio cables?
Stuart?
Same goes for how often I test my video cables, and that is before every gig. Before they go out and are out on location, you want to make sure they work. And that's regardless of whether you're doing things at an independent and free level or at the toppest level. It gets tested before every gig, before it's exposed to any client.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, for me, I don't go out and specifically test them, but I clean all my cables thoroughly with contact cleaner every 2-3 months, and right after cleaning, I test them.
Go ahead, Stuart.
One thing to note, if you find a cable that is not working, cut the end off of it so it doesn't accidentally get used again.
We do it right on site. Like I'm just like, hand me a knife and just cut the end off. Like you cut the end off immediately. Like you just, it is the most deadly thing in the world is for someone to have a cable that we know is wrong and then it's not working, and then someone sets it anywhere, it gets put back in. It finds its way back into the system. So if you know that it's a bad cable, cut the end off immediately. You can figure it out later, but it's just the worst. Next question.
Coming in from Sky Gleason in Seattle, Washington. Matt in the Kitchen will be live Zoom event teaching in a kitchen at Pike's Place Market. The chefs will have headset mics. Should I also have a shotgun as a backup and for picking up the kitchen sounds?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Sky. Yes. Yeah, and actually on Mad in the Kitchen 1.0, if we had more time to work with that, I mean, we were doing a lot of work on that production, that first season, and had we had another episode, we would have probably added at least a stereo mic in. And I wanted to show something that I bought recently. This is the Deity D4 Duo. It's $100. It's a stereo mic or a mono mic. It's designed to put on a DSLR, as a camera mounted mic. You need to provide it with power, with bias power, I think. But I'm curious about this. This would probably be a good tool for Mad in the Kitchen because it's small. I can't vouch for it as a backup for a head-worn mic, because for a backup for a head-worn mic, you need a good shotgun because it's going to be farther away and it needs to have some reach for it to be a true backup. This might work in a pinch. It might be fine. Give it a shot. $100. I'll put the link in Mukana.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, well, I definitely go with planting a shotgun or 2 or 3. But it would be important though to give marks to your talent that in case you have to fall back for that for your primary dialogue, they need to be at a specific spot because shotgun mics have a much narrower pickup pattern compared to other microphones. So they need to be on their marks.
Good, Courtney.
Yes, and what I was going to say, what Mickey just said, or have a boom operator person have that shotgun mic on a fishpole so they can follow the talent around. And
you guys are so funny. People.
Yeah,
hey, you got kids, don't you? Train them as boom operators.
I mean, other things that we've done in restaurants specifically or restaurants or cooking things have been to take labs and hide them in places, like under the table. Like literally we had one save our show because right under the lip of the table, separated away from it so we didn't get vibration from the table, we had a little one just hung out there and the mic went bad. We switched to that one. Is it as good? No. But did we still have a show? Yes. And so it was actually like we were kind of surprised at how good it turned out. It might have been the room and the things, but it was literally under the table, just poking out of one of the corners, and again, we didn't have it hanging down from above.
No?
It was on the table. Anyway, and it was a very solid table. It wasn't something that is going to have a lot of vibration. But again, things like that, I think a shotgun's better, but I would say that we have used that, and again, it saved us on a couple shows to have those hidden somewhere in them. The second thing is that we all often try to put 2 different mics on people just to make sure. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, there's a lot of tricks that the reality TV people do. I remember years ago noticing a certain light in the middle of a table on some reality show when they were out at nightclubs, and at various restaurants and clubs, it was the same light. And they were literally just bringing it in, putting it in the middle of the table, and then stepping back and rolling. But you could do the same thing with a mic in a thing and some sort of prop. Yeah.
Yeah. Just find an expert from the CIA. All right. Next question.
Yeah. Pay no attention to that bowl of fruit.
Yeah, exactly.
From Roscoe Jones, north of Disneyland in Brea, says much of today's gear we use wall warts with no grounds. Could lifting a ground still be dangerous? Should we prefer gear using grounds?
Go ahead, Jason.
If there's no ground to lift, you're going to hope that they're, UL listed or tested by some third party for safety. And if so, you're good to go. Another option for lifting something could just be lifting the audio ground, if that's an option from your line out. See if that resolves any hum issues too.
Yeah. Next question.
Coming in from Jason Robertshaw in Sarasota, Florida. Sending slides from Mac Mini to an Atem for Zoom calls. Audio from the Mac Mini to the Mackie mixer is picking up noise. I've traced it to the HDMI dongle, Thunderbolt dongle, that connects to the Atem. How to eliminate the hum?
Go ahead, Jason.
This gets tricky because some of the lower end Mackie mixers only have 2 ports and have a really cheap wall wart that comes with them. Also, absolutely everything that connects to that Mac Mini and that HDMI in and the audio, and if you're branching other stuff off, all of that needs to be on a singular connection. So you may end up with a fire hazard, but that's where I'd start.
Go ahead, Mickey.
So if you're going out the unbalanced headphone output of the Mac Mini, I'd switch that over to using a dedicated interface with balanced connections or Dante.
Next question.
Sorry, my mouse was elsewhere. Coming in from Josh Kaufman in Pittsburgh. Free or low budget spectrum analyzer to aid in EQ on the Windows platform?
Go ahead, Stuart.
Okay, there's 2 solutions here. The freest one is the visualization tools in VLC, which will display a spectrum analyzer, and you can download some plugins. But I would suggest actually plugging in using one of the sound analyzers you can get on your Android phone and what have you, and just using it through the microphone.
Mickey?
Depending on what you're EQing, if you're EQing to, say, for aesthetic purposes like a voice, I would stick to using my ears as opposed to some sort of graph. Though if you are trying to EQ, say, to figure out where feedback happens, like if you're ringing out a system, Wave's GEQ is currently on sale at $30. GEQ, it's a 30-band EQ with an RTA built in.
Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Audacity, which is the free recording software, has a built-in spectral view, and you can use that to analyze your audio, and it's free and it works cross-platform.
And all I'll say is nothing is free. Just some things are measured in cash and others are measured in time. Next question.
All right, this one comes in from Douglas Carmichael. Says, what are your experience been with real-time vocal pitch correction as a fix for pitchy singers?
Oops, sorry, I hit the wrong button. I think I just pushed it. We didn't have any hand up, so I think I hit the wrong thing. I haven't done. Has anyone done real-time vocal? No. Okay, we'll move on. Sorry, we don't have an answer, and I hit the wrong button and pushed it off. But we don't have an answer. So
we don't have Kanye West on the panel today. Guess you can tell.
Next question.
All right, from Douglas Carmichael. Says, I know that female voices are often used for emergency announcements in large venues because the high mids or highs cut through. Can you keep the highs from piercing while still cutting?
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, not all female voices have piercing or harsh mid or high end. Again, every person sounds different. Every person's voice sounds different. If you do encounter voices that have harshness at certain frequencies, then EQ will fix that.
And for most of those announcements, we definitely listen to them in the venue. Like listen to how they sound, and tweak the EQ to get it to where it sounds good in that venue. It's not just the person's voice; it's also the space that it's in and how it responds to that voice. Go ahead, Marty.
Well, if we're talking about, life safety announcements, like when the fire alarm goes off and there's an announcer, saying head towards the exit, those systems are specifically EQ'd to be really annoying so that you can't ignore it.
Yeah. There's for Salesforce's events, there's this English show caller, and that she does for a long time, she did all the announcements. Like, she just record all the announcements for it, beforehand. And it was just the perfect voice for Moscone. Like, it was just this perfect, wasn't too wasn't too bright, it was just this perfect and a nice English accent. And you always felt nice, but I always wanted her to be mean. Like, I just wanted to hear that voice be, just get out of here, but we never got that. I tried to persuade them to do it. It just didn't work. Next question.
Coming in from Dick Brewer in Guatemala. Dirk Brewer, sorry, Dirk. Do you use signal analyzers that records a log of all signal for the signal for 24 hours to see if there are signals that occur randomly that might appear spontaneously and not observed during setup?
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm assuming he's referring to RF, for RF coordination and wireless mics and whatnot. And the answer is sometimes. I've done a couple of events where the company I've worked for has asked us to set that up ahead of time, because we've been in RF crowded environments. For example, in a hotel where there are other events going on, or in convention centers and things like that. The best thing, though, the first thing to do around that is to actually walk the environment. See who's there. If you are in a hotel, for example, and there is in-house AV, go up to them and ask them, hey, what frequencies are you using here? And hopefully they have a list they can provide, and you can work that into your coordination. The thing with 24-hour, the 24-hour cycle is a good thing, but it doesn't replace being on site, having someone really look at RF throughout your event. Because you never know who's going to walk in the door and turn a transmitter on. And that's just the nature of the beast.
Go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I'm also assuming that this is for RF. So when we're setting up, like when we're preparing to install wireless microphones in any kind of a venue, it could be a church, it could be an auditorium, it could be anything. RF is kind of like sunlight. It is what it is now. But in an hour from now, it'll be different. And tomorrow it could be even different still. I can look at a spectrum analyzer, in a venue and see what RF frequencies are being used, what transmitters, what, wireless microphones, walkie-talkies, whatever, at that moment. But if I'm installing a system that's going to be used for a long period of time, this is just a snapshot in time. I can't predict what is going to happen tomorrow. So it's a very useful tool to have a receiver set up that can log over a long period of time, because then you have a longer snapshot of what's going to be happening. And it helps in the planning. And then, that still doesn't mean that you'll, not have interference, because any TV crew can come in and turn on a wireless microphone at any time, and you won't know where that is. So it's it's not an easy thing to do, but it helps.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yes, I agree with everything everyone said. And even if you're not using RF microphones, there can be high energy RF in the environment that will get into your analog audio. If you're shooting, for example, on a naval ship, like a destroyer or aircraft carrier, radar, the high-powered radar that they have on all those ships will get right into all your audio gear, and it'll give you a little zook, 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 and you can't get rid of it. So know that. Or if you're shooting right next to a radio station transmitter tower or something, that can also rectify and come into any analog audio circuitry. But
I once had in Lookout Mountain and outside of Denver, there's a radio, all these radio towers that get over the mountain, into Denver. And there's so much power coming out of those that we had to cover everything in foil, because otherwise you literally just pick up the radio stations and the lines. I mean, it was so much, 100,000 watts of radio coming through, and everything that's metal picks it up. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, two quick things to Courtney's point about the RF being induced into analog equipment. I did an event on the Pompanito, which is a sub parked in San Francisco Bay, and the thing that I thought was a guy wire was the shortwave radio antenna, and and once I took my cable and made it 90 degrees to that thing instead of along it, it solved the problem. The other thing I wanted to say, and this I'm piggybacking off what Marty said, is yeah, absolutely. It's like sunlight; it could change. The thing to be careful of is when you walk into a venue and you're talking to someone who comes up to you and you've asked them about their RF situation there, and they say, "Oh no, it's all set. We've coordinated everything. You don't have to worry about a thing." That's the time to start worrying. And that's the time you monitor from the beginning of your event to the end of your event.
Yeah. Go ahead, Dennis.
I was just going to add a little story from when I was at school running a parents' evening. And the people on stage were mic'd using the overhead connections behind the curtain on the stage. So we had quite a long drop of XLR cable, and it started picking up Radio 1. So I was hearing BBC Radio 1, and fortunately it seemed the polarity on two of the microphones was different, and by putting both of them on, it cancelled it out.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's a interesting use of cancellation. That's one that actually becomes useful. So that's great. The next question.
Well, the last one in here is actually a leftover from hour number 1, but I guess we can go ahead and handle it since we're a little bit over. Joseph LeBlond in Greeley, Colorado says, are there any recommendations for brands or websites to use for DisplayPort to HDMI or cables in general?
Go ahead, Jason.
DisplayPort to HDMI is an extremely simple, it's a passive adapter. Monoprice.com for this kind of thing kind of can't be beat.
Go ahead, Chris.
Literally nothing to add, but I just want to say I've been playing with this screen to layers thing the whole show. It's absolutely insane, Jason.
Yes!
It is. I mean, it's crazy. I can pick up windows. It captured my whole screen, my whole desktop, and everything is a layer. Everything is a layer.
I'll take my shout out on Mac Break Weekly now.
It's you'll later today. So anyway, yeah, I think we've won. I'll play with it a little bit, but I take, if you two are vouching for it, then we'll probably.
You do have to watch out because everything in my menu bar is a separate icon. It's a separate layer. Like you can go and turn off things, and and it does grab all of your desktops. So you saw there, it grabbed all 3 of my desktops.
That's amazing.
But everything.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Yeah, we'll check that. Yeah. All right. For the producers, excellent work. So that was, I wasn't sure what kind of questions we get. I do this all the time, but I really I put some of these subjects up and I go, I think this will be good. But anyway, so great work on sending us great questions to kind of mull through. I was a little worried at the beginning that we only had a few, but everyone picked up the pace as usual. And for the panelists, incredible. This and the education hour are our 2 strongest hours where we just have real subject experts that are here. And so I just love it on Tuesdays when our audio ringers show up and really dig deep into these answers. So I just really appreciate everybody coming. And tomorrow we'll talk about sweepers, completely different subject. And tomorrow we will be broadcasting to a private channel, so you'll be able to see that. We'll post that in the morning before 7 o'clock. You'll just see kind of a raw feed coming out. I'm not going to promise anything, but we'll be kind of going down that path. All right, now.